So I've picked up a bit of a reputation as a bug magnet. There are a lot of people that say software just fails for me and somehow I'm special and should stay away from technology. So some examples in my trip getting here. While I'm getting ready, packing my stuff to get on the airplane, 3 of my devices I'm going to take with me all said they needed system updates. And apparently so did the cat. So rather than pack and put the software I needed on them, I'm waiting for them all to update. And then one of them was a tablet I hadn't touched in 6 months, and I could not remember my root password. I tried and tried. So the problem with this is I can factory reset it, but to factory reset it, I have to enter the wrong password 15 times in a row. But as you see, it wants me to wait 5 minutes between every time I enter a wrong password. So I'm there when I should be getting ready to come here, entering my password, wait 5 minutes, enter my password till I can get to factory reset the device. You know, bugs interfering with my life. So I get to the airport, Phoenix Airport. I live in Arizona, get to the Phoenix Airport, and Facebook alerts, welcome to Las Vegas. I'm thinking, I'm not in Las Vegas. Las Vegas is about 500 kilometers away from where I am. I'm not in Las Vegas. So then I'm on the plane. I've got some music I've downloaded onto my phone, open up my music player, pick my offline music. It says, sorry, there's no internet connection. You can't listen to your music that's on your device. The bugs don't leave me alone. I get to the airport in Washington, D.C., and the advertising and all the middle of the concourses all are prompting for Microsoft Windows updates. Do you want to restart? Software bugs are everywhere. So I'm on the plane, the long 9-hour flight across the Atlantic, and I see they offer internet. So I go to their sign up for internet, and I get to the credit card. You pay them $12 or 10 euros or something to get it. In the browser, I couldn't do my auto credit card fill, and it says I can't do that because it's an insecure page. So I started looking. Sure enough, it's an insecure page. A major airline is collecting information, credit card information, over an insecure page. But it's okay. They have a warning saying it's secured with SSL. The notice is good enough, right? So while I'm on the plane, I plug my phone into the USB jack in the back of the seat in front of me, and my phone pops up every few minutes telling me if I want to access data, I need to enable data, but I explicitly configured it to charge only. I only want it to charge, but it keeps warning me I can't download data. I don't want data. If there is a data connection with that unknown aircraft system, don't trust me to connect to it. Then I get here, and I install the EcoCar app and try to sign up. It only works with Polish phone numbers. You need a Polish phone number to activate it. Apparently, they don't want business from tourists outside of Poland. And then once I get here, I get notification from my pool guy who replaced a pump on the pool, and he sent me an invoice and wants to be paid. So I go online to pay him. Well, QuickBooks is down. And I can't pay him. I want to give you my money, but the software is blocking me from doing that. So bug magnet, it's not just me. Failing software happens to everyone. Some notice more than others, but I think we have become so accustomed to bad software, we just move along. I watch my granddaughter who can't quite read yet, and she can make the error dialogues go away and continue on with whatever game or whatever she's trying to do. Uh-oh. No problem. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. Today I want to talk about healthcare.gov, which is one of the biggest software release disasters that I know of. And it was in a contested political environment. And I did not work for the government. I had nothing to do with building healthcare.gov. So let me give you a little background. I'm going to try and go real quick. Both because we're out of the U.S., and I want to explain a little bit about healthcare in the U.S., give you a little bit of context, and context about what created this, and then my involvement.
Hello, everybody.
So first, what is
I want to talk with you
healthcare.gov?
about a new consumer website, healthcare.gov. It's a good resource for understanding the new law, and it offers a few simple tools to help you take your healthcare into your own hands. For the first time ever, you can see all your insurance options, public and private, in one place. Let me show you how it works. Now, I have pretty good health care these days, but let's roll back the clock to when Michelle and I were just getting started in Chicago. From the home page, I choose my state. Then answer a few more questions. Based on my choices, the system has returned options. The first points out that I may be eligible for health insurance that comes with a job, either my own or my spouse's. The second option is to explore the market for individual insurance options in my area. So let's try that. I'll plug in my Chicago zip code, and it shows me all available private plans.
Okay, a website you can go to, find out what your health insurance options are, public or private. And it's kind of an important thing if you got the President of the United States doing demos on TV on how to use a website. So a little bit of context. In the U.S., most people get their insurance through their employers, and employers subsidize it. Employees pay some portion. It varies depending on the company. There will still be deductibles and copays. They may need to pay for some portion of care, but that's a bit more than half of insurance. There's also a small percentage that is people buying private insurance. So, before the 2010, 55% came from employers, 9% direct. And there's about 31%, about a third is public insurance. And the two major public insurance programs in the U.S. are Medicare, which is for the elderly and disabled, and Medicaid, which is for the poor, and there's also a program that's part of that that's for children. Medicaid is run by the individual states with the federal government helping pay for it. Now, I'm watching some people pointing and looking. You're probably trying to do the math. The numbers don't add up. Well, that's the way the government does math. But I suspect there's probably some overlap between people who have insurance from multiple sources, and that's why they don't overlap. I couldn't find in the report an explanation of why. So what is often called Obamacare is really the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2010. It had these are the major provisions of it. One was making health insurance easier through marketplaces like healthcare.gov. The idea was that each state would have its own marketplace, single place you can go find out what your options are and buy insurance. Some public health insurance reform. They expanded Medicaid, so they raised the income limits so that more people could qualify and get coverage. They changed the way Medicare pays so that there wasn't incentive for providers to keep finding things wrong with people and make more and more money. There was private health insurance reform. There's standardized minimum coverage, and they banned consideration of pre-existing conditions, both in determining whether you could be covered or a specific something would be covered. And then there were incentives to participate. There were matching funds provided to states. So if they expanded their Medicaid program, federal government would match dollar for dollar what the state spent. There are subsidies for private insurance premiums, so depending on how much money you make, you can get some subsidies to help pay for that. And there were penalties for not being insured, a percentage of your income that's a tax that you have to pay if you don't buy insurance. So for each month you don't have insurance, you need to pay. So this is what's in the law, and now you know probably more than most Americans do about what Obamacare is. It was very controversial. You can see in the two houses of our legislature, it was pretty much fairly evenly split, for and against, along party lines. The American public, that red line's unfavorable view of it over time, shortly after it passed, versus favorable, also fairly evenly split, mostly unfavorable opinions of it. 28 states sued the federal government over various provisions of the law. 36 states declined to create their own marketplace, which created, now the federal government needs to create a marketplace for all these states that wouldn't do their own. Thus, healthcare.gov was for a whole bunch of states rather than a few. So my involvement, so the first year of this was 2014. In 2014, my tax household was my wife and I, our teenage son, and then my adult daughter and her daughter. And my daughter and her daughter were part of my tax household because I was subsidizing more than 50% of their financial needs. Therefore, they fell under me. But I had insurance through my employer, and as part of the new law, they had to insure my daughter up to age 26, but they didn't have to provide insurance for my granddaughter, who wasn't my child, but was my daughter's child. So we're kind of in this place in between. So my involvement was, I'm an individual. I need insurance for my granddaughter because I heard there's a penalty and I don't want to pay it.
Just visit healthcare.gov, and there you can compare insurance plans side by side the same way you'd shop for a plane ticket on Kayak or a TV on Amazon. You enter some basic information, you'll be presented with a list of quality, affordable plans.
Yeah, so October 1st, 2013, this website went live off of a bunch of PR and a bunch of people saying this was going to be a horrible thing. Why live October 1st, 2013, and I went there shortly afterwards, and the first thing I noticed, it's not like Amazon or Kayak. I couldn't shop and browse pans. It required I create an account in order to even browse. So I try to create an account. It has your normal, ask for username and password, some rather confusing password rules, which as I'm doing this, I'm thinking of some older family members that I think would really have trouble figuring out the right rules. Ask for security questions as normal, and then you submit that, and I would get please wait, and this would be an infinite please wait. It wouldn't submit, wouldn't submit. So I'd restart, and I'd have to go back to the beginning of the form, providing basic info. I get messages, the system's unavailable. I try again, it'd tell me my security questions had duplicate answers, but they didn't. So the error messages weren't matching what I was seeing. Same with those username and password rules. My password would match the written rules, but it'd tell me they failed. Then at some point it tells me my username already exists. Well, this to me suggests some of those please wait. It actually submitted it and created some record in a database, but it didn't give it to me. So now I have to find a new username. I also had some email already exists. Well, got to use a different email address. It often get this, that we'd taken the site down. So basically it launched and I can't even create an account to log in. And it wasn't just me.
It's incomprehensible to me that the rollout of this administration's signature piece of legislation has been such an incredible mess. You tried to get some answers from the president's point man on the issue. Was he able to give you any?
He gave us some answers, Anderson, but he danced around some other questions. He said basically that they acknowledge that there are problems. He says this is not acceptable, all the glitches, people getting booted off, etc., and that they have people working 24/7 to try to fix these problems. So I followed up with this question. But many argue you had many months to get this booted up and to really perfect it. Why then still so many problems?
So we went through a testing period, and during the testing period to identify problems, create a punch list, fix those things. The president said from the beginning, with a site like this, of course there are going to be glitches. But let's understand why there was the initial problem. We had 250,000 concurrent users at one time. I mean, just for perspective, Medicare.gov in a given month has 5 million unique visitors. This in the first 3 days had 8.6 million unique visitors, which speaks to the demand.
And he essentially acknowledged they were not quite ready for all of that demand, especially in that 3-day period, Anderson.
Well, first of all, any kind of rollout like this, you're supposed to anticipate for the highest volume of visitors possible, and it clearly goes beyond just unique visitors. I know you've spoken with people who say this was just a sloppy setup. I've spoken to a writer who's looked into this who says kind of the front end, the actual website stuff that people see, and the back end, that there were multiple contracting companies involved in the production of all of this, and that it seems like they weren't communicating, they weren't coordinating.
It seems that way, Anderson, and as you mentioned, we've talked to experts. The expert I talked to helps corporations design major websites. He says this was sloppy, that it's inefficient, that there was too much code left on the website, which slows everything down. He said it doesn't work at the most basic levels. So I asked Mr. Simo, basically, you know, who signed off on this? If you don't want to tell me who signed off on it, can you tell me if that person had any experience designing a web application or any experience just in managing one or any experience at all?
Brian, there was a team that worked on this night and day, put together a website called healthcare.gov where in 3 days, 8.6 million people went to. Identified problems, are working through those problems, are going to fix those problems.
The other thing that they can't give you a figure on how many people have actually now signed up, I just don't buy. I mean, I just don't believe that. You know, because they're what they're promoting is, well, we had all these unique visitors, we had an overwhelming number of people actually looking, but actually signing up, actually creating accounts, the fact they're not able to give numbers to me, I just don't buy that they don't have those numbers. What do they recommend for people who've been trying to sign up for days now? What's their advice?
Their advice is, if you're frustrated, keep going back, call a help center. There are help center lines on there. I tried to log in today, I couldn't, but you can see a help center number at least.
Our website is broken because of the incredible load. You're getting frustrated, so keep trying. Keep loading our system that can't handle the load. So, first day, they had 2.8 million visitors. They still can't tell us how many accounts were created or how many applications were submitted, which to me suggests a problem that can do that. They only had 6 insurance plan enrollments. 2.8 million people went there. Maybe some just to browse. It's new. Let's learn about it. But only 6 enrollments. At the end of the second day, they had 248 enrollments, and at the end of the first week, they had 6,700. But the claim was still, these bugs are functions of volume. Take away the volume and it works. But keep coming. Keep trying. So did they load test this? Their actual concurrent visitors were 250,000. They said they expected 60,000, but they found they failed beyond 1,100 in their load testing before they released. And they went live anyway. So, still want to create an account. But I'm a software tester. So I'm starting to see in the news, I'm having trouble. I'm going to put on my tester hat as I look at this website, try and find insurance for my granddaughter. I'm going to put on my x-ray specs. I'm going to look in my browser development tools. I'm going to see what's happening. You know, I can't look at what's happening on the server, but I can see what's happening on my end. So one of the first things I learned is that the error messages don't at all match what's happening. So here's one that tells me your account can't be created at this time. To me, that suggests it's a load issue like they've been saying. But what's returned in the, from the web service says my email address is not unique. So again, in one of those attempts I'd made, it assigned my email address to an account but didn't complete the process, so now I can't use it. But it's going to tell people to keep trying when they got into that error state. It's tell me, I got all the way through. Check your email for the email validation email. But I looked, there's a 500 error. It didn't even successfully submit or process the request. But it's telling me to sit and wait for the email. So I eventually get to a point, I get all the way through. It sends us, as many sites do, a verification email that gives you a link and you come back and confirm that you own the email address it goes to. And I wait for that email for hours, and it doesn't come. And I've got my mobile phone. I'm actually on vacation with the family, and I'm kind of watching it. And it finally comes in. I click it as soon as I get it. It gives me an error message saying that too much time has passed. That code has apparently expired. So I call them. I call the support number. They tell me that we're overloaded. The emails will take up to 3 days. So wait 3 days. And I said it took hours, and it tells me it's too late. If it comes 3 days later, that doesn't solve the problem I'm trying to tell you that you have. But in the process of watching what's happening, I realized I don't need that validation email, because when I submit the form, it returns that email validation ID direct to the browser. So since I've had an email, I see how to put that in the URL and put that in and can validate my account. So the whole email validation is useless. So I finally get success, validate. I've got an account. I can go look for insurance now, right? So I try and log in. I get a header and a blank screen. I was expecting, I hope I had more options than that. But I look in my developer tools, I see a bad request. Something's invalid about one of the requests as part of the login, and it's the one that loads the user profile, which I'm going to assume is what should be displayed there. So I try on my mobile phone, and I get a slightly different error, but I still don't get something. I'm thinking that this may be a clue. So I go into incognito mode, and voila, I can log in. So I start looking what's different between what was sent when I was in incognito and when I wasn't. And basically what I found is that there was over 4K of cookie data that basically had my browsing history of the help documents, that it had built up so much cookie data that now a different web application server for the application side of the system couldn't handle that much cookie data and was croaking. So I deleted stuff from my cookie data and I could log in. So I'm in and I'm starting to find bugs everywhere, and I'm going to show some samples of some of the security things. There were many other issues as well. So I found under some error conditions it would redirect the secure page to HTTP insecure. So you're in the page secure, some error condition happens, bam, you're insecure. And so like an example here, it's putting my username through somewhere. That password reset system emails, both the username and password are emailed together. Now, for a lot of sites, this is not a big thing, because I think, what are they storing? There's not much risk with this data, but this is a big politically controversial website. You're going to have millions of people are going to have to go put maybe some financial information, maybe some healthcare nobody really knows yet. Seems to me it's a target for identity thieves or people looking to create trouble. So a better way to do this would be you give that reset code, you've hit it, you ask them what username goes with this, or what email goes with this, but they send them together. They had a lot of third-party tools, analytics tools, advertising tools, Google's DoubleClick for ads. There's also places where Facebook or YouTube widgets were on pages, and they would take information, private information, like my income, my family size, my password reset code, and they were putting that in URLs, and they just passed that on to that third party who probably doesn't want that data. And I contacted some of these third parties, and they got on healthcare.gov and told them we don't want that. And at the time, I worked for a company that we had widgets like this who were on websites, and part of what I did was monitored, if we get this, we don't want it, fix your implementation of our tool. It would return stack traces to the browser. What that does is potentially give someone information about your infrastructure that they could then see, are there known vulnerabilities in that, what you're doing, or help them narrow down their attacks on your system. So generally that should not be returned out to the browser. That password reset code that was expiring too quickly, they fixed it by making them so they didn't expire. So we are October 20, same code, ends in 8DB. October 24th, same code. November 1st, same code. November 3rd, they made them so they never expired. So if one of those codes was compromised, now it could be used forever. Their bug fix introduced something else. There were claims in congressional hearings, no one has attempted to hack the site. And while I'm watching those, I put a semicolon into the search box, and I see the auto-suggest has recorded SQL injection attempts. It is now suggesting them to users. No one has attempted to hack the site.
You've probably heard that healthcare.gov, the new website where people can apply for health insurance and browse and buy affordable plans in most states, hasn't worked as smoothly as it was supposed to work. The number of people who visited the site has been overwhelming, which has aggravated some of these underlying problems.
Yeah, so they're still saying it's load. Load is the problem. These security problems don't look like load issues, or even if they were exacerbated by load issues, they shouldn't have been there before. So as I'm finding security-related things, it's now beyond just, oh, this is silly, I'm going to laugh at it, or this is really stupid. It gets to, I need to tell someone. So I call the healthcare.gov support line and try and talk to them, tell them about a security issue that I found. And I had several conversations, both with the text chat. Here's one where they tell me call the FTC, which is Federal Trade Commission, regulates business trade. and looks for scam stuff. But the times I contacted them, they told me to contact the Federal Trade Commission because their only way of thinking was my identity has been stolen through their site by someone, and that's what I'm complaining about, versus you have bugs that may lead to that. And they told me to contact the FBI. They told me to call my local police. I could just see this. If I called my local police and told them that there was a bug on a federal government website, that probably wouldn't go over very well. So I start blogging and tweeting about what I find. If they're not going to take reports, they're not prepared to it, I'm going to share. And yeah, so I start tweeting, blogging about the things that I'm finding, and that catches some attention. One of the first publications that caught onto it was Consumer Reports, and I talked with them. At that point, the focus was how can we help people actually register and get this to work, talk to them about the cookie issue. But basically, their recommendation, and this is an organization that was very pro the Affordable Care Act. They were promoting it. They were saying this was a good thing. They said stay away from healthcare.gov for at least another month. Then Time Magazine picked up, also talked about the cookie issue and some issues there. But then there was a big issue that I found. Those two got some attention, and there was a problem with the password reset functionality. So password reset kind of bypasses your security controls by giving you an alternate way to get in. So it's a place security issues can hide. And that got a lot of attention. Yeah.
On the issue of security, there was a security breach that arose recently that I read about, at any rate. And what I think is very important here, because the issue of privacy has been raised, and I think that that has been answered, because very importantly, there isn't any health information in these systems, but there is financial information. So my question to you is, has a security wall been built? And are you confident that it is there and that it will actually secure the financial information that applicants have to disclose?
Yes, ma'am. I would tell you that there was not a breach. There was a blog by a sort of skilled hacker that if a certain series of incidents occurred, you could possibly get in and obtain somebody's personally identified.
Isn't that telling? Isn't that telling?
And we immediately corrected that problem. So there wasn't it was a theoretical problem that was immediately fixed.
Okay, so she's right. There was not a breach. I did not hack the site. I did not, access information. I shouldn't damage any information. I'm not sure what she means by sort of skilled. But this was kind of presented as an excuse, a certain series of incidents you could possibly get in. It's theoretical. This is what security vulnerabilities are by definition. Usually there are certain combination of things that people don't think of, and in general that's often what the big ugly software bugs that hide from us for a while are. It's a combination of things, and just because it hasn't been exploited, but do they really know? They say no one's attempted to hack it, but their auto-suggest is suggesting SQL injection. They don't know how many people have signed up, but they're certain that no one's gotten into the site.
One of the other things that came out in the hearing today, Megan, was the fact that the Obamacare healthcare.gov actually was hacked last week. So Lord knows where this personal information is right now. Once people feel like they've been burned once or exposed or somehow compromised, they're not going to do it again.
Maybe we should talk to the hacker about how he got onto healthcare.gov.
But that is
we
not
could learn
true.
some lessons.
See, that's another misstatement. This site was not hacked. Someone said there's a possibility of vulnerability that it could be open, but the hacking actually did not occur. The problem that I have with this is that unfortunately the botched rollout has taken over the story.
Okay, so you get a glimpse into the politics combined with the ignorance here in the reporting. It was hacked, no one's going to trust it, it's horrible, and then people would conflate that to the law is horrible. And then on the other side, you have this guy saying, no, it wasn't hacked, and he's right there, but my concern is people are going to think the law is horrible, and which really is kind of what was happening, the two sides. One was kind of trying to pretend there wasn't a problem because they saw that people were thinking bad website means bad law, and on the other side it was, oh, this is evidence there's a bad law, and because of the website. So much of the reporting was, the political undertones, and sometimes not even undertones, it was directly there. So what was it that I found? Now, it was a set of REST API endpoints that you could get, basically go through, get information for the password reset. So they had one endpoint, you give it a name and email address, public information. You can go buy lists of names and emails. You can find them on the web. You can find me, but name and email address would give you the username that went with that. And this would just return right to the browser. Or you could even just, they were all Git, so you could just put that URL in the address bar with the right parameters and get it easily automatable. You give it name and email, and it would give you the security questions, not the answers, but the questions, where someone has picked, I think it was 3 or 5 different questions, 3 questions to answer. You give it a username. There's another point, you give a username. You could get the password reset code. So you didn't need to own the email address it went to. You just give your username that you've now confirmed exists. You give it the username and password reset code, and it would give an email address. So you could do this full cycle and confirm I've got valid information versus I don't. So these are the different endpoints. So the one thing we don't have here is the security question answers. This gave us from public information, we can get all the pieces except the security question answers. So is that a problem? How might you use this? You collect your information, get through the endpoints, get your information you don't have, then you want to gather your security question answers. So you could try social engineering. Look at Facebook, try a phishing scam. There's problems with the website. Everybody knows it. You could send out an email with this information you've collected and say, hey, there's a problem with the website. We need you to reset your password, answer your questions, and collect them. So what were these security questions? Were they things, and it was presented as things only you can verify? What's your favorite radio station? What's your favorite toy when you were a child? Cuisine, your oldest niece, relative's telephone number, name of your favorite pet, parents' wedding anniversary. A lot of these things I can find on Facebook. They're not things people are going to treat as private information.
Hey, so do you have pets?
Demonstrate.
Actually, we keep putting off getting pets. Our kids there's a lot of pressure.
Did you ever have a pet when you were younger?
Sure.
What was the pet's name?
It can sometimes be that easy. Now, it's hard to automate that, but if your pet's name is securing financial information somewhere, probably not a good way to secure that information. And the big banks do it too. So in this, as I'm tweeting about and blogging, I got Katie Cunningham gave me a great example. This is your test of whether it's good security questions. Can my ex answer this? If they can, it's a bad security question. So a lot of people will say, well, then you should lie to them. Just make up things. Well, that kind of defeats the purpose of having some mental aid that tells you, what password. They might as well say, enter your 3 passwords. And it gets worse. So in the application, at one point it asks for another set of security questions. These are the only 4 options. And it's basically a password that will give a third party who calls in access to your information. What city was your first job in? Your favorite high school teacher? Middle name of your oldest child? Your childhood nickname? Not very secure answers. So what resulted of that? I was subject to a denial of service attack by the press. once that congressional hearing happened. There are some news organizations employ some interns that are very skilled at finding people. I'd have the same person find me through 8 different possible channels to find me. No one showed up on my doorstep, though. My wife was afraid someone might. Educators contacting me, come talk to my students. And it was a distraction from my job for a while. And my boss was actually, he was actually enjoying what was going on, but he was a little concerned someone was going to come take me away. So lots of interviews, TV, radio, lots of attention came on this, but it's in this very political environment. I tried very much to stay apolitical in this, picked up a few labels along the way. My favorite there is not too bright. Someone basically said because I expected it to work, I wasn't too bright. So there's some security vulnerabilities, and as long as all kinds of other problems. So very quickly, the reporting and the spin from the government was, it doesn't really matter, because this website's not a data collector. The box is empty. So does it matter? Whoops. So there were articles like this in CNN Money that they basically said is not of any much value what's in there because the website goes to all these different back-end government systems at different government agencies, and the information's stored there, and it just gets the information from there to make decisions. So don't worry, there's not really much that's going to be lost.
We are storing the minimum amount of data because we think that's very important. The hub is not a data collector. It is actually using data centers at the IRS, at Homeland Security, at Social Security to verify information, but it stores none of that data.
Doesn't store that data. It just goes and gets it. So it's not a data collector. What are some of the things it's collecting? There are dozens of pages in the application of it collecting data. But that's not all. It not only collects data, it goes to those government agencies' back-end systems and gets data and then puts it in a JSON document that it returns all the way out to the browser. So like it validated my employment, my salary, I told my salary, and it went out. And so like here's an example, it came back and it said what date I was hired, when my last paycheck was issued, what my pay rate was, how many hours I worked. So if someone compromised my account, not only can they get what I've entered, but they could potentially get information that's been pulled from those back-end systems, which has been the excuse of we shouldn't worry. So some examples of some of the hundreds of fields that are returned. Baby due quantity, absent parent name, incarceration date, yes, same-sex spouse, tobacco last used. No, we don't collect any data. Now, I don't know really which one of these are populated and which aren't. Like, I had no incarceration end date, so I don't know. But at least there was concern caused that all these fields were returned. And like I said, there were dozens and dozens of data. So really what they potentially created was a web portal to a back-end government systems. So let's apply for insurance. That's why I came here, right? There were bugs throughout the process. So as I'm applying and going through the questionnaire, basically this JSON document gets submitted, information gets added along with history of what I'm doing and comes all the way back. So I think some of these errors are due to that document somehow gets into an unexpected state, and we get things like person 2 of 1. Or we get here, I get almost all the way, I'm down at review and sign, I would think I'm almost done applying for health insurance. Who's no data in table? There's nobody applying. I thought I was almost done, but apparently everybody's disappeared. Do you have a parent living in the same state? Okay, so this was the next issue I find. I'd hit times where I'd get to, basically it asks like 1 or 2 questions at a time. You hit save and continue. It asks 1 or 2 questions at a time, hit save and continue. And each time it'd do that exchange, it'd get to where I'd start getting these uncaught type errors. And again, it was data. There were nulls in places where the JavaScript was not expecting null data. And I get to a point in the application I couldn't go any further. And it happened in a lot of different places, so it wasn't consistently the same place. So sometimes I'd have to wipe out an application and start all over again to do this. And I couldn't get through. Also had some times where I didn't even get the save and continue. I'd open it up, and I can only go backwards. And there's no way to fill it out. And at one point during this, I did not submit an application, but when I logged in, I got notification my application consideration was in progress. I have eligibility results. Wait, I didn't submit an application. And it basically gave me a decision document, table above, without any table above. So somehow an incomplete application got processed by the system. So that data exchange, it goes back and forth. As I'm doing this, I hit a point where I'd hit save and continue, and I'd wait 8 seconds, wait 10 seconds, wait 20 seconds till the next question came out. And here's an example. There's one where it took 17 seconds to send it, and then wait almost 9 seconds for a result, and come back. All I did was press save and continue after saying whether or not we were paying student loan interest. And so I looked at, well, what's that data packet that's going back and forth? We're almost a megabyte in size. This huge document that is gzipping. So it's got, the client side has to process it, zip it, send it, come back, and this is happening at high volume, and I have no idea what processing is going on the back end, but it's high volume, large piece of data every time I answer one question. And then how many 250,000 concurrent users doing this, there's potentially a problem. Yeah, so here's examples as I'm going through trying to do a few questions. You know, megabyte every time I answer a question. So after about a month of trying to submit an application, I actually get one all the way through. It tells me results have been determined. I've still not been able to see what my plan options are. This isn't how I buy a TV on Amazon. I don't go apply to buy a TV and see which ones I'm approved for. I get to browse the options. And if I can't afford one at checkout, I don't have money for it. And it tells me that I don't qualify. So why don't I qualify?
So everybody who wants insurance through the marketplace will get insurance, period. Everybody who wants insurance through the marketplace will get insurance.
Yeah, the president said everyone who wants will get insurance. So it tells me to qualify, I need to live in the U.S., I must be a U.S. citizen or national or otherwise lawfully present in the country, and I can't be incarcerated. I'm not incarcerated. My granddaughter's not incarcerated. We're both citizens. We both live in the U.S. So why am I not approved? I meet the qualifications. Well, they have a appeal process, but they never got to writing the software to manage that. So they basically had an office to which you could mail in your appeal, and information sat there for months until they created the processes to handle them. So what went wrong with this? Why did we end up with such a disaster of a website?
In an ideal world, would have been a lot more testing. We did not have the luxury of that with a law that said it's go time on October 1st.
In an ideal world, they would have done a lot more testing. And it's easy to blame testing when we see something happen. And I'll say testing did contribute to the issues with this website. But that was not the biggest problem. This was not primarily a testing problem, although testers potentially could have helped. But yeah, it wasn't just a testing problem. But they did know they had testing problem. She said, law said we had to go live October the 1st. So we were going live. We had a mandate to do it. And we couldn't test, but we're going to do it anyway. Apparently no pushback. There were some reports, such as Security Things' report, that Basically said they had not tested all of the security controls with all the versions. They had an open high issue. So in the U.S. government, and I started looking because in congressional hearings they were talking about there were no high findings. That's how all the executives answered when asked about security issues. So I looked up and said, this is the government. There's a standard somewhere that says what this means when they say there's no high finding. And basically a high finding to the U.S. government, you think of all the things the U.S. government or other national governments can do in the danger of software issues. Personally identifiable information is not a high finding by definition. We have weapons systems. We have things that can kill people. There are things that can disrupt world financial markets. Those are the things that qualify as high findings. Even exposing social security numbers and names for every citizen of the United States would not qualify as a high finding unless you make the claim, well, then it will disrupt financial markets. So that's why it would not, because it was just the information. But the rules explicitly say that personally identifiable information does not qualify as high. But that doesn't mean it's not a problem. So what else went wrong?
I'm going to try and download every movie ever made. And you're going to try and sign up for Obamacare, and we'll see which happens first.
Okay. Okay.
This is real simple. It's a website where you can compare and purchase affordable health insurance plans side by side, the same way you shop for a plane ticket on Kayak, same way you shop for a TV on Amazon. You just go on and you start looking, and here are all the options.
How many have signed up thus far?
Fully enrolled? I
Yeah.
can't tell you because I don't know. We are taking applications on the web, on the phone. We'll be giving monthly reports, but I can tell you we've had not only lots of web hits, hundreds of thousands of accounts created. We have
So it's been
lots
hundreds of
interest
thousands of people have signed up.
of accounts created, which means that then they're going to go shopping. John, this is like
what?
A kayak site where you might check out what plane you want to get on. The good news is you don't have to buy it today.
It's broken. The good news is you don't have to buy it today, but we really want you to buy it. This is the president's signature legislation, but you don't have to do it today, and that's our good news. So there was some poor design. There was also poor visibility. They really did not know how many people had signed up. So the first thing was their design. Their basic approach was, and still is, that you create an account, you log in, you verify your identity, you apply for insurance, then you submit your application, they determine your eligibility, which is really your eligibility for subsidies, or do you qualify for public insurance? And then you get to browse plans. So they've created this bottleneck up front, which now they've got identity management around everything. They've got to identify your eligibility before they show you things, rather than an approach more like your typical e-commerce site, like Kayak or Amazon, where you let people browse first. They potentially could have then, model pricing, where you put in, here's what I think my income and thing is, and it show you what subsidies you get or whether you might qualify, with the explanation that this is, just a model, may not be what it really is. And then you could even asynchronously determine eligibility and let people select a plan and enroll. So they had it flipped backwards. Anyone who's designed and been involved with e-commerce sites knows you want to as small a barrier to people getting closer to making a purchase early on. And then you want to get them farther down that funnel and make it harder for them to go back out, not make it hard for them to get in, help move them towards a commitment. But this is the way governments often work. The law says you got these requirements, we're going to verify those first, we're not going to let you browse. And they really didn't know what was going on. So Mikey Dickerson was a site reliability engineer at Google that was part of the team that went in to try and help fix this. He thought he was volunteering for 3 days, and now that there's a new president, I don't think he's there anymore, but ended up creating a new organization, the U.S. government, to help deal with software project issues like this. But he said there was no monitoring at all. Nothing. They built no dashboards for this website. It says they watched CNN. to know whether or not the site was up. This is not how you launch a website like this.
Mark, I don't know what ideal world she's referring to, so I'm just going to stick with the one we're in. What law was she referencing? What law required this website to launch on October the 1st?
I can't really speak for Secretary Sebelius.
I'm not asking you to speak for her. I'm asking you, what law was she referring to? Is there a law that required this website to launch on October the 1st?
Again, and that's a health policy and legal matter. That's not really my...
It's actually a legal question. Do you know if there's a law that requires this website to launch on October the 1st, or do you know whether it was just an arbitrary date that the administration settled on?
I actually do not.
Would you find that to be important, whether or not we really had to go October the 1st, given the fact that we weren't ready to go on October the 1st? Would you find that relevant, whether or not we actually had to launch a substandard product?
Sir, I respectfully am a technology guy trying to...
Don't short yourself. You're the smartest one in the room.
Well, that's not true, sir.
Trust me, I've been in this room for a while. It is true.
So here we have the CTO of the United States of America doesn't know whether a law required this go live or not. Secretary of Health and Human Services referring to it as a law. There was no law requiring that date. And there was not, in retrospect, sufficient pushback or asking, why is this deadline this deadline? And as professionals, we need to not necessarily be the contrarian, but to understand, why is this deadline a deadline? So we know whether or not we need to make the case for, we need to deliver less, deliver later, deliver something, so at least we're informed. So this was what went on in much of the congressional hearings. The executives were all, that's not my job, I don't know, and basically no one took ownership of this. So ultimately, I'd say this was a management failure. And so did the CMS Inspector General, their study of what happened, that they identified as a high risk of failure with technical complexity, a fixed deadline, and a high degree of uncertainty. They made missteps along the way. There was an absence of clear leadership, delays in decision-making, lack of clarity, and an inability to recognize problems or the magnitude of problems once they had them. So management was not managing the project well at all. And Mikey Dickerson also kind of has the same conclusion. So there were 55 companies involved in building the marketplace. 55. None of them was responsible for overseeing the overall project. And Mikey Dickerson referred to it as an eternal loop of damnation, trying to get the companies working together. You know, and he tells stories of one will enter something in a ticketing system to have someone else do something, but that other group uses a different ticketing system. So they don't even see the requests that people are sitting around waiting for a response from. Dysfunction all around. They had no monitoring. No one was responsible for making sure the system was usable. And like I said, they watched CNN to see if there were problems. And the biggest thing is no lack of, or no sense of urgency. The people involved were used to big government software projects failing. This is the way it always is. We'll eventually fix it. You know, we'll get money, we'll fix it. So it was just like everything else. So what might we learn from this? What might we do? Your turn, you know, whether it's on the job or even outside, I'd encourage you to be, you know, take on that bug magnet label, but not because you're attracting them, but because you're noticing and seeing things that others might do, and help exercise your skills. Recognize testing is investigation. The requirement, the big messy requirements documents are not required. Communicate carefully, and ethical behavior is essential. So what do I mean by these? First of all, testing. We do a lot of things that are testing, but we don't want to lose sight of that it is really learning through experimentation. I'd also say observation. I do a lot of observational testing where I'm not actively doing experiments, but I'm looking at data. But, you know, are we questioning, studying, modeling, making inferences, and trying to learn and understand and fill that gap between what we know about the product and what we need to know about it? So in the government, part of their testing failure, and I've got some confirmation with some people that were involved in fixing it afterwards, and I spent 10 years in government software business. They're very focused on pass-fail compliance with written specifications. Don't think beyond that. If it's outside that, it doesn't matter. When I was working in government, if it was more of a test to let's learn, we couldn't even call it a test. We had to call it a demonstration. And I learned that I could do that, to do that kind of testing. And we do demonstration reports and demonstration plans. Well, I really kind of think of it the other way. The fixed pass-fail, we're demonstrating that it can work, while to me the testing is the investigating and learning about it. And one way we can do that, heuristics I find very useful, is from James Bach and Michael Bolton, and actually it came out of the development of BBST as well. But few hiccups, and it's mnemonic to help us think of places requirements may come from. So familiar, we want things to be inconsistent with familiar problems. Like the OWASP top 10 list of security vulnerabilities is a list of familiar problems, or it may be things we've experienced. So we want our software to be inconsistent with that. We want software to be explainable. If you can't explain it, it's probably too complex, and there's probably a problem. And it may be in your understanding, maybe in the software. We want to be consistent with our understanding of the world around it, and the world in which software works. Is it consistent with its own history, with the image we want to portray, with comparable products? So here at Amazon and Kayak, we're referred again and again and again by the chief executive of the United States. To me, that's a requirement. The testers should have been looking. This is what the president says. It's not like that. Do we have a problem here? In the claims that were made, you have executives making claims about how it's going to work. That would fit that too. Also, user expectations. Is it consistent with the product itself? Is it consistent with its purpose? Its purpose, help people buy health insurance. One-stop shop. And is it consistent with the law or our written specifications? So there's a whole lot more to what is required than what we may see written down. I mentioned OWASP Top 10 is an example of inconsistent with familiar things. Jacob Nielsen has usability heuristics, which I found very useful to look at usability. I've created the failure heuristic. I don't have time to go through all of these, which helps with, from Nielsen's list, help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. These are tools we can use to help us think through problems. So we need to communicate carefully, be accurate and precise, distinguish between what you observe and what you conclude. This is something I was taught early in my testing career working in the government. They were very big on, and we actually, in our documentation, we had results, analysis, and conclusions, and then the recommendations that came out of that. And it was very, we couldn't have a conclusion that didn't backtrack up to results that we observed. So I find it's very useful to understand that distinction of what I see versus my analysis of it, the conclusions I make, and the recommendations. And I find, for me, that's very helpful to kind of follow that path. And if I can't fill in that whole path, maybe my conclusions are wrong. So avoid speculation and blame. Explain the things that go without saying. Other people are going to come from different perspectives than you are, have different knowledge and understanding. Demonstrate the problem. Explain potential consequences. And then if, as testers, we make mistakes. Admit your mistakes when you make them. You know, don't appear to be the person that's just complaining and pointing out everybody else's faults. Show your mistakes as well. And ethical behavior is essential, especially like this. It's not my website. I wasn't hired for it. So I want to understand and honor ethical and legal boundaries. So as I tested, I took the time. I was going to do no harm. I was going to honor the terms of use. If you don't have permission to test a site, look and see what their terms of use are. Determine what your rules of engagement, how you're going to interact with it is, so that you don't violate the law or the terms and have police knocking on your door. Use the interfaces provided. Don't attempt to access, modify, or delete other people's data. And then also don't enable others to do harm. So as I reported the security vulnerabilities, I did not report details. So I got the things that did get fixed, they get fixed by some connections I made in the press who knew people in the government. In some cases, I think reporters would say, hey, I'm going to squeal on this, but I'm going to give you a chance to fix it if you give me an exclusive. So I kind of had the back door, and apparently they knew about my blog since that came up in congressional hearings. So I just continued that, and after things were fixed, I'd go back and update blog posts showing the details. So be careful in your reporting, I think both internally, but especially outside if you're not hired to do it. Don't enable others to do harm. And that's it. My blog, where I've written some detail about a lot of this, is isthereaproblemhere.com. I'm on Twitter at QualityFrog. Feel free to email me, tweet me, talk to me. I love to talk about testing.